Hi, this is David Orlofsky, and welcome to the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Thank you very much. And whether you're watching with our friends over at Torah Time, or wherever you watch or listen to your podcast, it's always nice to have you around. And by the way, just a shout out to our friends at Torah Time. You know, they had one of those GoFundMe things. I forgot what it's called exactly, and pages. I just got 2 donations on my page. And it was like months ago, but I guess, there are a couple of Amshinava Hasidim out there who watch, and, they just realized now that it was taking place. So. And that's what, by the way, I don't know if you heard that the Amshinava Rebbe just said, then the election between Trump and Biden, you should vote for Trump. So that just came out. Anyway, and don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment. And we have a sponsor for this week's episode, sponsored by, okay, you'll have to help me here. I don't know if this is Rachel Raz or Rachel Raz, because Rachel and Rachel will both be written the same way. So if I got it wrong, just give me a Raz. In honor of my husband, Yisrael Raz's birthday. Now, the sponsorship was sent in like 2 months ago, but you never said when his birthday is. So whenever it is, happy birthday, Yisrael, and many happy returns of the day. And whenever it is, you should always celebrate it. And if not, then, as they say in Alice in Wonderland, we will celebrate your unbirthday. So, which is 364 days. So there's many more unbirthdays than birthdays. So whatever works for you. Okay. One of the things we do on this podcast is we try to talk about very practical things for life. There was a time that I was writing a column in the Hamodia every other week on chinuch. And then at some point they added in a third person. And so I was writing once every 3 weeks. When they added in a fourth person, I dropped out. So I said, you obviously don't need me if you have so many people talking about chinuch already, But when I was one of 3, it was once every 3 weeks, so I was okay with that. But I would occasionally get letters saying, could you please write about this? Could you please write about that? Could you deal with this issue? And I would always write the people back and I'd say, there are 2 other people writing about chinuch. Why are you asking me? And they say, because everyone knows that you deal with the most practical topics. In fact, sometimes my topics were so practical that the Hamodia wouldn't publish them because they hit a little too close to home. Some of those columns really gave me an opportunity to express my more creative side. One of my favorite columns is I wrote about how kids aren't getting enough sleep and how it's affecting them. I wrote the whole column like from the point of view of somebody who was half asleep in that kind of a tone. I thought it was so brilliant. And my editor said, don't ever do that again. Basically, it should be an iambic pentameter. There are many different problems that come up when people don't get sleep. Studies have shown that kids who don't get sleep, that some of the practical advices of how you do that, the Hamodia tends to be much more practical. There was a time when there were 3, for want of a better word, Torah community-oriented publications in English in Eretz Yisrael. There was the Yated Ne'aman, there was the Hamodia, and there was the Mishpacha. And I don't know about the Yated in America. I don't live in America. They stopped publishing it here in Israel. But whoever was putting it out, it was very rough. Every time you read it, you felt like you were getting beaten up. And the Hamodia was put out by Hasidim. You felt like you were eating a piece of kugel, It's much more positive, And the Hamodia always managed to present this blackness, So someone said to me, what's the difference between the 3 publications? I said, I'll show you the differences between them. The Yated put out a series of articles about the joys of having a lot of children. And interviewing people with 10 children, 12 children, 15 children, 40 children, and how wonderful it is and how positive it is, what a mitzvah it is, very, very stark. I said, if the Hamodia put that out, it would be helpful tips for people who have large families. If the Mishpacha put it out, it would be the dark side of large families. Although there are no statistics available, evidence would suggest that there are many problems of large families. Yossi, footnote, not his real name, comes from a large family, and he describes many of the problems he goes through, and they'll bring a couple of anecdotal evidence to try to support the dark side of large families. So I was right for the Hamodia, and they, wanted more practical things. So every now and then I would get somebody suggesting that I talk about this topic or that topic. And I say, there are other people. Why are you writing to me? And they say, because everyone knows that you get the most practical. You'll speak, Mama Lashon, what needs to be said, and you'll speak it out. Sometimes to a fault. Almost everybody knows this already, so it's not, I'm not breaking any ground here. But it was close to 35 years ago that they asked me to speak in Rabbi Sharfman's seminary on the topic of platonic relationships. I did not prepare for it, as I don't prepare for these podcasts or anything else that I do. That's not really true. My Motzi Shabbos Shiurim, I used to prepare. I would actually write a whole outline and everything and plan it out. But so I walked in and I said to the Madricha, do I have to behave myself? And she said no. And I said, okay. Anyway, I gave this, I don't know if you call it a shiur, class, a talk, I don't know what it was. I come into the yeshiva that I was teaching in the next morning, and the guys all say, hey, I heard you spoke about platonic relationships in Sharfman's last night. I said, how do you know? He says, I got a copy of the tape. I said, well, I finished late at night, because that's okay. By the end of the week, every yeshiva and seminary in Israel had a copy. And I realized that it was a topic that people needed to hear about, but nobody was talking about it. I'm sure I've told this story in the past. I meet these three girls, and one girl says, I heard this tape and I broke up with my boyfriend. And the second girl says, I heard the tape and I broke up with my boyfriend. And the third girl opens her purse and takes out the cassette. And she says, my mother makes me take it with me wherever I go. I said, what'd you think of it? She says, I never listened to it because I was afraid if I did, I'd have to change my life, and I don't want to. So Kadosh Baruch Hu used me as a shliach to talk about something very practical. However, there was a Beis Yaakov, which ironically, I happened to know this was a major problem. They didn't. They thought they had a super stark Beis Yaakov, but I knew for a fact that a lot of girls were involved with boys there. And one of the people on the board tried to answer me from speaking there because he never heard me talk about the tape. I think that was actually to my advantage, but he heard that I talked about the topic. And he said, anyone who can talk about a topic like that should not be allowed to speak in our Beis Yaakov. If I had it to do over again, of course I would do it, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu used me as a kli to be able to get this message out to Klal Yisrael. That's what I believe. So I tried to be practical, and that's what I tried to do when I write my columns, etc. In fact, I have in my little folder of articles, 3 or 4 half-written articles that I started writing, and halfway through I said, this is trite. I don't want to write this. Yeah, it's not dealing with serious enough issues in a serious enough way. I want to get down to what needs to be said. So I like to be practical. So I would like to speak this week about a topic that I believe is important for people to consider. And that is machana parnosa, machana leben, making a living, choosing a profession. Yeah. Now, I'm not a professional. I do not pretend to be a career counselor. But the Gemara discusses how you choose a career. And choosing a career is extremely important because the direction you choose to go in is going to be based on a lot of different things. First and foremost is it a profession that is going to allow me time for my avodas Hashem? If not, then try at all costs to avoid that profession, even if you really like it. As the Gemara in Kedushin says, did you ever meet an animal or a bird that has a profession? For the most part, not. There are some circus animals and things like that. But for the most part, most of them don't really have professions. They just live off of the land. He says, and animals were created to serve me. And I was created to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So could it be that HaKadosh Baruch Hu provides for animals without them having to work, and they were created to serve me and I was created to serve Hashem, that he wants me to work in order not to be able to have time to serve him? I'm going to give up the ikr for the tuffle? That doesn't make any sense. Tzvi Kushelevsky was talking about this in Yeshiva. I've told this story before, where he says, the Rambam says, the difference between a person who Torah umanasai, who only learns, and a person who has a profession is that a person who works 3 hours a day and learns 9 hours a day, as opposed to a person who learns 12 hours a day. Someone wrote the Chazon Ish during Bein Hazmanim, how much am I mechuyev to learn? He says, well, during Bein Hazmanim, you're like a balabas, you only have to learn 9 hours a day. And the boy wrote back, I don't do that during the year. You want me to do it during vacation? But balabas works for 3 hours. 3 hours a day. So Rav Tzvi says, so there are people who tell me I can't make a living in 3 hours a day. So you give up the ikr for the tuffle? So instead you work 12 hours a day? Not the way to do it. So instead, a person has to make sure that they have a profession that leaves them time to be able to do the avodas Hashem. So as you're looking across what you're going to choose to do, take this seriously into account. Is it possible to have a profession where you work less time and make money? Sure. But you have to think about it. You got to try to plan it out. Yeah. One of my daughters was turned down from a high school here in Israel because in her interview they asked, what are you planning to do? And she says, I hope to be a sheitel macher. And the fellow around the seminary, the high school, they call it a seminar here in Israel, the person around the high school said, she's not for us. A girl should have she'ifas. She should have dreams, aspirations. She should want to be a mora. She should want to be a teacher. So I asked my daughter, why'd you say that? And she said, teachers have to leave their kids with babysitters and they don't get paid a lot of money. A sheitel macher works out of their house and they can stay there with their children and they make more money than a teacher, so I can support a boy in learning. Well, that was the wrong answer. She should have said she wants to be a teacher, even though it means taking your baby after 6 weeks and dropping him into a daycare center instead of staying home with him and not making as much money to support a husband in learning. I don't understand it. To this day, I don't understand it, But when it comes to making these kind of plans, I did a question and answer for yeshiva recently. And one of the questions was, how do you know when you're ready to get married, etc.? And the first thing I said is, well, can you answer the question that my father-in-law asked me when I came by the house? How do you plan to support my daughter? What do you plan to do? I used to have girls in Dovid that we were close with, and they would bring their future husbands by, for a Shabbos meal. And I would ask them that question. How do you plan to support this young lady? And they'd say, bitochen. And I said, oh, that's great. Did you tell the makolet that when the bill comes in, they should send it to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? I said, but all my rebbeim told me that you should just have bitochen. I said, oh, no problem. So did you tell the makolet to send the bill to your rebbeim and they'll pay it? She said, I shouldn't have bitochen. I said, bitochen is after you have a plan of how you're going to earn a living, and then your wife gets sick, or your kid suddenly, needs dental work or something like that. That's where bitochen comes in. But if you're telling me I don't know how I'm going to pay at the end of my month my bills, so if you're a big enough tzaddik that you expect the mun to fall out outside of your front window and you have to reach in and get it, that's great. And if you plan to be surrounded with the Anani Yakavod, that's also great. But if you need a place to live and food to eat, then tell me how you're paying for it. You have to have some kind of a plan. Now, that doesn't mean, like most people say, I want to make a living, and they really mean I want to make a luxury. I had a friend of mine that I went to school with, and he was in university, and then he decided to go off and learn Torah, and he decided to stay in learning. And eventually he had no choice but to get a job. So he had someone teach him plumbing. Now, he didn't become a licensed plumber. To become a licensed plumber in New York is very difficult. They have a lot of rules and regulations to be able to become part of the official plumbing union. And they are very protective, very hard to do. Bar Kochba, if you wanted to join his army, you had to cut off your thumb and uproot a tree while riding on horseback. But it's much harder to become a plumber in New York. You can't get off that easy. But so he was an unlicensed plumber. When you're an unlicensed plumber, you don't make a lot of money. So he also took a course in how to install burglar alarms. And he would learn a half a day and work a half a day. So his parents were very upset. First of all, they were upset, of course, that he left college and didn't get a real job. But if you're going to do this already, work a whole day. They said, this way, you're not making a living. And he said, I am making a living. I'm not making a luxury. I can rent an apartment. I can't own a house, but I can rent an apartment. My children have clothes to wear. They're not designer clothes, but they have clothes to wear. My family has food to eat. We don't have steak for dinner, but we have food to eat. So we're managing. We have to count our pennies, but I'm making a living. You don't want me to make a living. You want me to make a luxury. And that was the famous story. I forgot who it was with, but this very wealthy person is looking. His house is on the beach. He has this gigantic house on the beach. And he sees this fisherman has pulled his boat up onto the beach. And he's lying in the sun. And the guy calls out to him and says, why aren't you fishing? He says, I caught enough fish for today. So, I'm going to relax a little bit. He says, but if you go out there and you make more fish, you'll make more money. And he says, why? He says, because then you have more money. You could buy another boat and hire another fisherman to work for you. And soon you'll make more money from the more fish, and you could buy a whole fleet of boats. And then you'll make a lot of money, and you'll be very successful. And then you could buy a big house like me. And then you can lie on the beach and relax. He says, but I'm doing that now. So what we're saying is, instead of working until you're rich and then sitting and learning a half a day. Do it now. What's important to you? That a person has to sit down with your priorities, and my avodas Hashem has to come first. And if you don't have enough time to be able to do your avodas Hashem, to daven with a minyan, to be able to learn Torah, etc., so then maybe you should be looking towards a profession that will do that for you more. Now, this is very important. A lot of people are defined by their profession. I'm pretty sure I told this story recently. It has that ring to it. Somebody meets the Brisker Rav and he says, so who are you? He says, I'm in the sugar business. He says, okay. And a few minutes later he says, so who are you? And he says, I'm in the sugar business. I bring in the sugar cane from the Caribbean and I manufacture it into sugar. So, okay. And a few minutes later, he says to him, so who are you? He says, I'm in the sugar business. I make sugar and then I distribute it. He says, you keep telling me what you do for a living. You don't tell me who you are. That's your job. That's not who you are. Who are you? And it's such an important question that are you letting your job define you? Or are you looking for a job that's going to make you money? Now, ideally, if you can find yourself a profession where you can make money and it leaves you the freedom to do what you have to do, that's a tremendous thing, right? That would be the ideal profession. One where you're doing something that gives you the freedom to be able to do what you want to do. Now, there are some people who choose to go into Avodas HaKodesh. They're going to be a rabbi, they're going to be a rebbe, they're going to be a Rosh Hashiva, etc. If you're going into this profession, understand that the odds of you making money are, even just to make a living, is slight to middling. It's very hard. One of the great scandals of our generation is that we pay more money to the people who take care of our kids and clean our houses than the people who teach our children. We do not respect that profession at all. And that's why, for the most part, the best and the brightest don't go into chinuch because they can't feed their family. So only the most idealistic people who are willing to live poor, or the people who are have some other form of income, from an outside source, are able to go into it. But a person who wants to go into Habatzas HaTorah to be able to support your family, it's almost impossible. We've made it impossible. I'm sure I've told this story. Yeah. Noach Weinberg asked me in 1983, if you could do anything to save Klal Yisrael, what would you do? And he, of course, was talking about the Kiruv Project. He knew at the time I was running Long Island NCSY, and I had a reputation that I was very successful. So what would you do? I said, I would double the salaries of every Rebbe and Moira in every day school in America. And he looked at me like I was crazy. And he says, I'm talking about Kiruv. I'm talking about reaching out to people. I have a project here in Brazil. I have a project here in Germany. I'm talking about going out and doing things to help Klal Yisrael. And I said, Noach, let's say I take you seriously. I said, and most people don't, but let's say I take you seriously. You're going to makariv 1 million people. Where are you going to put them? We have no infrastructure. The day school movement, unfortunately, is not being successful, and a lot of kids are getting turned off from Judaism. And the reason is because we don't pay them any money. So a guy comes in and he's going from one job to the next job and then giving bar mitzvah lessons at night. And then he's also the youth director, and he's just the whole time running from thing to thing. Doesn't have time for himself, doesn't have time for his family, doesn't have time for the students. They always say, Rebbe, can I ask you a question? He says, we'll have to do it later because I'm running out the door. And everybody remembers this when they went to day school. The Rebbe was always running out the door to another thing because we're not paying them a living wage. I said, so you're going to bring all these people into a system that's broken. You're going to drop them into a bucket with no bottom. And these Bali Tshuva that you make, they're going to send their kids to these day schools and they're going to fall right out again. He wasn't impressed. But that's something a person seriously has to consider. And a call to arms. And like I say, I'm sure the people who have the means to change the situation are probably not watching my podcast. They're much too important people for that. But for the Hamon Am, let's at least try to, ring the bell and get the word out there that our number one priority should be to pay our mechanchim and mechanchot enough money that they can concentrate on perfecting their profession to be able to give our children the time and expertise that they deserve. And that is the only way you can do that is if it's taken seriously. But if a person tries to be in chinuch for X amount of time until he begins to perfect his craft, he suddenly realizes that the only way he's going to feed his family is if he leaves chinuch, and go into high tech, or real estate or some other business that makes money, or go into administration where the most successful mechanchim, we take them out of the classroom and put them into administration where now they can call up and talk to the mommies who call up to complain that their son forgot their lunch, and that's what they'll do all day and fundraise and do other stuff instead of actually teaching, which is what they finally proved they do well. So if you're very successful as a mechanech, we take you out of the classroom. What a broken system. But we've created it, and I certainly don't have the means to change it. I don't have that kind of money. The money is out there. Don't kid yourself. If all the money that right now is going to be spent this coming year on Pesach hotels instead went to increasing the money that the Rebbeim and the Moras get just for that, not giving it to the institutions, giving it directly to the teachers, boy, you would see such a seismic shift in Klal Yisrael. It would be unbelievable. But at this point, if someone says to me, I'm thinking of going to Habatzis Torah, I have to tell them, in all honesty, think seriously whether or not you're going to be able to make a living. What a terrible thing for someone like me to have to say, because I so believe in Habatzis Torah. I went to Chavetz Chaim. If you go to Chavetz Chaim for 6 months and you don't go into Habatzis Torah, you carry the guilt with you to your grave. So of course, I think Habatzis Torah is extremely important. But what a shud, what a condemnation of the frum world that we don't pay these people enough money that they can support their family with dignity. It's a terrible thing. And you could keep cranking up the tuitions, but you're trying to get blood out of a rock. There are people who have told me, and these are people who make well over $100,000 a year. I would love to have more kids, but I can't afford the tuitions because I'm not making it now, because it just costs too much money to run a frum family today, and the tuitions are crushing. And if you make a certain amount of money, they don't give you scholarships. That's it. Can you imagine that we've created a chinuch system that discourages from Jews from having children? Do you think there's not going to be a taina on us up in Shemayim for this? Trust me, we're a generation that's going to have to answer for that. Rav Nochemka of Harodna was the Chavetz Chaim's Rebbe. He was a kid and his family could not afford a mechanech. So he never learned Torah. And he was part of a traveling choir that sang with a chazan. And he worked in a wine factory. And until finally somebody took pity on him and decided to teach him Torah, and he became a gadol b'Yisrael. And he always would teach children from poor families who couldn't afford it. He would take them under his wing. That's how the Chavetz Chaim came to him. and teach them Torah because they couldn't afford it. So what can I tell you? What a tragedy that I can't recommend Habatzis Torah to people from a financial point of view. But, it's a terrible thing. But a person has to sit down and say, okay, what can I do? So that's why the Gemara says you want to teach your son a paranosa, kalav nakiya, clean and easy, right? Something, ideally, that's the best profession. And that's why Jews are drawn into real estate. Because hopefully you can, sit in your office and make some phone calls and check things out and leave yourself enough time to do other things. People who are good at the stock market or gambling, but I repeat myself, and they know how to do that. So then, they can play the stock market, and it doesn't take up a lot of their time and leaves them time for other things. Now, some people are investors, and they figure out good deals. It doesn't take them a lot of time to put a good deal together, and they have people who are lining up to give them money because they know how to make good investments. Yeah. There are certain people who dafka go into professions that they don't have to spend a lot of time on. For example, there are certain professions in medicine that you don't have to have a practice up and running all the time. For example, an anesthesiologist. You don't need to develop much of a rapport with your patients. You just have to say, count backwards from 20, and then they're unconscious. And then you just monitor them to make sure that they don't die, and that's it. So I knew an anesthesiologist who made Aliyah, and every few months he would go to America and work for a few weeks and then come back. And that's all he had to do. And he made enough money to support himself, and he didn't have to be there all the time. I know a fellow who became a radiologist, which, he would read x-rays. Now they send it to him by an email. And he has a computer that gives him perfect clarity. So he sits in Eretz Yisrael and he spends a few hours a day reading x-rays, and he makes an American salary, and he's left to sit and learn the rest of the day. So it's absolutely brilliant. So there are options available. Now, some people don't have the talent for these things. You got to be real. Some people are not going to be able to do these kind of professions. But if you can choose a profession that is not going to take that much time in your life, and like I mentioned, I know people who are Shetu Machrim who are very good at it. And they work a few hours a day, and they can stay home, with their kids, and tremendously successful. And they can support themselves that way. Whereas their friends who are mowers leave their kids in daycare, work a whole day, and don't make a fraction of the money that they make. So these are all different considerations when it comes. You want to have a job that leaves you enough time to do your avodas Hashem, and you want to leave yourself a job where hopefully you don't have to work that much and you can still make yourself a salary. Now, having said that, fellow told me an interesting story. He says he went to school to become a CPA, an accountant. And he invested years. He was about to take the CPA exam, and he suddenly realized he hated accounting, but he hated it with a passion. Not just he didn't like it, he hated it. It depressed him. It made him upset. And he said to me, should I take the CPA exam anyway? And I said, why? You don't want to do this job. So go and find something to do that you do want to do. Don't do something that's going to make you unhappy. And every time I've told this story over, people have criticized my advice. And they say, he should do it already. He's gone this far. Or I gave an example where someone did 3 years of a 4-year degree, and they suddenly realized they made a terrible mistake and they don't want to do it. And people say to me, they should do the last year and get the degree so you have it in your pocket just in case. I said, but the person doesn't want to do it. Yeah, but it makes sense. Invest another year doing something you don't like just so you have a safety. And I say, what can I tell you? I'm at an age now where just to throw away a year on something that you don't like, something you really have to think carefully about. So it's got to be a job that not necessarily you get your fulfillment from it, but that it's something that you can do that does not make you unhappy. And I'll tell you an amazing story. I went to Chavetz Chaim. And I was at a Chavetz Chaim convention of people who were all out in the field already. And the Rosh Yeshiva was doing a question and answer, Rav Henach. And and the question was, what do you do if you're in the field and you're just not happy? You know, you're a Shiva, you're a Rav, you're a Rebbe, whatever it is, and you're not happy. What should you do? Now, I want to give you a background to this question. His father, Dovid Leibowitz, came to America at the bequest of the Chavetz Chaim himself to go and save America. And he came to open up a yeshiva to train people in Habatzas HaTorah, to sit and learn Torah Lishma. And that was his job, to come and save America. Now, it wasn't like Torah Daas at the time where you're taking a guy for a short period of time and give him a smicha and send him out. It was to make Talmidei Chachamim like they had in Europe. In fact, the Agudas HaRabbanan would not give smicha to anybody who got smicha in America, except for Chavetz Chaim. They felt they learned like a European shabacher, you know. It was a very long program and on a very high level. So, but the idea was to create these people who would then go out and build Torah. Rabbi Dovid died young from all of the aggravation that everyone gave him. He had a very hard time. His board turned against him and trying to drive him out of his own yeshiva. Rabbi Chait said when we were in yeshiva and we'd walk down the street, people would throw rocks at us. That's how much they hated people who were learning Torah. And it was just terrible, you know. And he died young, and his son, Rav Henach, took over at a very young age. And his whole focus was Habatzas HaTorah. And everybody was given this message. I received a mission from my father, who received it from the Chavetz Chaim, to go out and be Marbitz Torah. So now, here's Mechanchim who are in the field, Marbitzei Torah, and they say, what do you do if you're not happy? And Rav Henach said like this, it depends. If you're telling me you're just not happy, you're not cut out for this field, and every day you dread going to work and you're not enjoying what you're doing, get out of the field. Give it up. Get a different job, because more than anything, you have to be happy. I was stunned to hear Rav Henach say this. And then he followed up and he says, but if you're basically happy and content and you enjoy it and every now and then you get down, so that's the Eitzah Hara. I'll give you some eitzahs how to cheer up. But that original, you have to be happy. To the point where he's driven into these guys, you have to do Habatzas Torah. My father gave his life for it. We're on a mission that the Chavetz Chaim gave us. And if you're not happy, leave the field. So that's for sure true about accounting. It's for sure true about any other profession. If you're not happy, you have to be happy. That doesn't mean you have to make it your life's work. You know, I'm sure I told this story also. You know, people tell me I repeat my stories. It's 7 years. Of course I want to repeat stories. There are some famous speakers I know who have about 8 stories, and they tell them over and over and over again. And everybody laughs the same way each time. So, you know, I'm entitled to once every few years repeat a story. Thank you very much. It's not my fault that there's an internet. But so it could be I told this story beforehand. I was living in Eretz Yisrael for 1 year. And I came back to America and I meet somebody. I don't really know him. And he says, where do you live? Eretz Yisrael. And he says, what are you learning? Before I can answer, he says, I learned my lesson. I said, I've met enough of you people from Eretz Yisrael. And when I say, what do you do? They say, I'm learning Baba Kama, I'm learning Sanhedrin, I'm learning Ksuvas. So I say, oh, you're learning in Kollel? And this one would say, no, I'm a lawyer. This one says, no, I'm in computers. This one says, no, I'm a doctor. But you didn't ask me, what do I do for a living? You said, what am I doing? What I'm doing is learning Gemara. That defines me. So it doesn't have to be a job that you use to define your life, but it has to be something that you're not unhappy doing. Because if you're unhappy, even if it's Avodas HaKodesh, don't do it. Find something else, because a person has to not find their job depressing. And so therefore, people are going to be drawn in certain things. So if you can find something that you really enjoy and figure a way to make money out of it, that's terrific. Because as the Gemara says, there is no profession where there aren't poor people and rich people. People can make money from anything. One of the wealthiest people I met made his money in mail order. And there are lawyers, their practice was never successful. They just never made money. I know people in real estate who make money hand over fist. And I know other people, they just can't close the deal. They can't sell. It just doesn't go for them. So it's not the profession. People, I'll go into real estate. Yeah, shkoyach. It's not the profession. Kodesh Baruch Hu will send you a panosa based on what you deserve and how much your bitochen is. But try to find something that you enjoy doing. And if you can figure out how to make money out of that. And that's why when I started teaching, I wasn't really cut out for teaching at that point. And I stumbled into NCSY. I was tricked into taking a chapter. And I suddenly discovered that I had such a talent for this. Schmoozing with kids and taking them, roller skating and bowling, and making trips with them and having fun with them and hanging out with them. Turns out that that's my skill set. That's what I do better than anything. And I was like, my gosh, this is what I'm doing for a living, taking people around. I know people who are tour guides here in Eretz Yisrael. To me, that's a rough job because you have to leave your family. Very often the tours are overnight and you have to sleep in the hotel by yourself, and get up the next day. And, sometimes they don't even put you in their hotel. They put you in a cheaper hotel, with the bus driver, And it's a real thing. And they say, I love it. I love going around Eretz Yisrael. I love pointing out. I love speaking about these things. They just enjoy it very much. So if you can figure out how to make a living at something that you enjoy doing, then that's a plus. Somebody told me, and I feel like I've said this over before, that there was a question and answer in Merkaz HaTorah, and Rav Radman, Olav Shalom, who was the mashgiach there. So the boy asked him, how do you choose a job? And he says, it should be something that you would want to do even if you're not getting paid for it. So that's the idea. You should look at your life and say, is this something that I enjoy doing? And I'll tell you another thing the Rosh Yeshiva said. Somebody else asked the question. They said, what if you're running a yeshiva and you're so busy? And I know this from running an organization, when I ran Long Island and CSY. There's so much to do. I had before a convention, I would sleep every other night. I would just work straight through the night. I would work day, night, day, and sleep the next night. It was just impossible. My father was in the flower business before Mother's Day or Valentine's Day. They used to sleep in the store. Didn't even pay to go home. They were working nonstop. So he says, what do you do if you're working so hard that you don't have time for your own learning and you don't have time for your kids? And again, Rav Henoch, and I already gave you his background, he says, you can be a workaholic in Torah too. And if you're spending so much time in running your yeshiva that you don't have time for your avodas Hashem or for your family, then you're doing it wrong. And you cannot spend that much time. You're not Moisa Nefesh. You're a workaholic. You can be a workaholic in Torah too. So you do not want to be a workaholic. You want to leave yourself enough time for it. So these are all some of the considerations. Yeah. What does that mean for you based on your talents and abilities, your likes and your dislikes? So you need to speak it over. It doesn't have to be with a career counselor, but it's got to be with somebody who's a smart person and knows what's out there. You know, and they'll sit down and they'll make you a suggestion. I can't tell you what all the jobs are. I had a daughter who went to school for cybersecurity because they said this is a great and up-and-coming profession. You'll make a lot of money and it'll be very easy. And she hated it. Now she's working in Kiruv Rechokim on NYU campus, not making anywhere near the amount of money that she could otherwise, but she loves it. So you have to be honest and see what it is that you're good at and what you want to do. So that being the case, these are all the different decisions. Talk to people who know it. If they suggest shepherding, I would talk to somebody else. I don't think that's really, once upon a time that was a great profession for a Jewish boy, but today I don't think that's the way to go. So make your decision wisely, and like I say, this will apply to people who are trying to decide where to go in life. But even people who are in a profession, sit down and ask yourself, am I in a job that leaves me time for my avodas Hashem and that I'm happy with? And if not, maybe it's time to reevaluate. And that brings us to the question and answer portion of our program by Yehuda Kravitz. How do we reconcile the Kuzari's assertion that an entire nation can't fall for a lie about their own history with the myth of Palestinian peoplehood? The myth of Palestinian peoplehood is not something that the people were lied to about. They know perfectly well. They know exactly where they came from. You can talk to them and every Palestinian knows the truth. It's convenient for them to make up a story, to be able to get sympathy. Just like the lie about about Israeli genocide, just like they make up stories about the amount of Gazans who were killed. They lied about the statistics, just like they lied about Israel bombed the Al-Shifa hospital when it was in fact a Palestinian missile that fell short, just like they lie about everything else. Everyone knows the truth about the Palestinian people. And if you listen to people in the incoming Trump administration, whether it's Pete Hegseth or whether it's future Ambassador Huckabee, they'll all tell you the truth. Everyone knows the truth. Nobody's being fooled here. The fact that I say a lie that will help me to be able to get things across and to accomplish what I want, that's not what the Kuzari is talking about. What the Kuzari is talking about is, can't anybody claim that God spoke to our entire people? That doesn't mean I can't make up a story, right? That doesn't mean I can't say that Darius in the Peloponnesian Wars wanted to bring his boat over, but the sea was stormy, so he brought out a whip and lashed it until it calmed down, which Herodotus reports. So anyone can make up a story. There are stories about Paul Bunyan and his blue ox babe. I mean, anybody can make up a story. That doesn't mean anything. Yeah. And everybody can accept it. Nobody's saying that. What the Kuzari is saying is, look at all the other religions. Yeah. Yoshka one of the fundamental principles is that he resurrected from the dead and went up to heaven. That was seen by 3 people. And otherwise, you just had his word for it that he was the Son of God, if he actually said that, or that he was the Messiah, or that God spoke for him. He did miracles that were seen by small groups of people, when he walked on water, or he multiplied the fish and the loaves and things like this, So there were people who saw him do some signs and wonders. Big deal. The Chazal did that all the time. So that doesn't prove that God spoke to him. That proved that he has, he knows how to do some tricks, but, so could the amazing Blackstone. So could Houdini. That doesn't prove anything. So, but basically you're relying on him. Muhammad claimed that God came to him and told him his prophecy and that he should start this new religion. Okay, if you believe him, fine. If not, not. But Allah never came to everybody and spoke to them. You have to believe him. Joseph Smith claims that an angel led him to a mountain in upstate New York where he dug up these golden plates that he copied over as the Book of the Mormons, and then the angel took it away. Okay, if you believe Joseph Smith, that's fine. But no one claims that the angel came and spoke to everybody. As they tell the story with these 2 brothers, their father, who was the Rebbe, died and did not indicate who should take over, and each one claimed that he should be the Rebbe next. So it was a big fight. So one day, one of them came and said, Tata came to me in a dream last night and told me I'm supposed to be the Rebbe. He says, that's great. Tell him tonight to come to me in a dream and tell me that you are supposed to be the Rebbe, and I'll believe it. The fact that he came to you is not very impressive. So all the other religions are based on a person or one person. Yeah. What the Kuzari is saying is no nation claims that God spoke to everybody at the same time. And the Torah says no one will even make this claim. Why? Because it's so outrageous that if it wasn't true, no one would even make the claim. And so that's why doesn't any other nation say, don't you remember when God spoke to everybody? And they're like, no. Yeah, trust me. It happened. Because how come I don't know about it? I never heard about it from my father. I never heard about it from my mother. Yeah, it happened. The Kuzari's argument is that if it didn't actually happen, no one would have the audacity to make the claim. Not that somebody won't believe something that's not true. In the words of Abraham Lincoln, you can fool some of the people all the time and all the people some of the time, but you can't fool all the people all the time. I don't know if that applies or not, but I happen to have remembered that, so I'm saying it over. Okay, and Anonymous. What should our perspective be on issues which our Daas Torah has disagreements about? How can we have clarity when our Rabbanim themselves seem to disagree on what our perspective, reaction, or outlook should be on certain topics or challenges? That's why it says in Pirkei Avos, Aseh Lecha Rav. One of the hardest questions that I am asked by people who are beginning their journey in Torah Judaism is, how do I pick a Rebbe? And the answer is, I can't tell you. You have to find somebody where you hear what they're saying and say, that works for me. Certain people will be drawn to people who have reputations of being more machmir, and certain people are going to be drawn to people who are more makel, and certain people are going to be drawn to people who focus more on ahava, and certain people are going to be focused more on people who are drawn by yira, and certain people are going to be impressed by a person's learning, and other people by people's midos, and I can't tell you. That's why it's Aseh Lecha Rav. You have to make that decision for yourself, and once you do, then follow that person loyally and with fidelity. I cannot tell you how to pick that. Rav Nechuna ben Kana, the Gemara says, was one of the greatest people of his generation. It says the Azara's doors never closed on anybody as great as Rav Nechuna ben Kana. And they wanted to give him a position, but he was a Talmud of Beis Shammai. And they said, we would like to give you a position, but you're going to have to give up Beis Shammai and accept the teachings of Beis Hillel. And he said, I can't. That was my Rebbe, and that's who I was makabel from. And I can't give up my Rebbe's Masorah. And they passed over him. Nevertheless, on his deathbed, he told his son, I followed Beis Shammai because that was my teachers, that was my Rebbeim. But you should follow the majority and go like Beis Hillel. And that's why sometimes you find the children asking their father, should we follow you or the Chachamim? Because maybe you have a minority opinion. And even though I'm following my Rebbe, that's what I'm going to do. So the answer is, do Rebbeim have disagreements? Yeah. Goes back to Hillel and Shammai, Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai. One took an approach based on Ava and one took an approach based on Yira. And depending who my Rebbe is, that's who I'm going to follow. And throughout history, there have been different poskim who have different approaches. And although today it's not the same thing, but Reb Chaim Brisker fought against the Mussar movement very strongly. He felt this was an innovation that was going to take away from serious Torah learning, and he opposed it. And it seems, back at the time that, a person wants to spend time learning Mussar in addition to learning, he says, just learn Torah. And that was the machlekes. And some people followed the Brisker approach, and some people followed the Mussar approach from Yisroel Salanta, and they each were following their tradition. There was a time when the fights between Hasidim and Misnagdim were so strong that there were fights in the streets. Rabbi Akiva Eger's son, Rav Shimon Eger, his son became a chassid. He sat shiva for him. That's how dramatic it was. Today, you don't really see that today. You don't see that same kind of thing. People say, okay, you want to go with that approach, go with that approach. You want to go with this approach, go with this approach. History has sifted out which approaches are considered legitimate. So if a person wants to follow a Hasidic Hanhaga, and somebody else wants to follow a Mishnagdisha Hanhaga, so okay, they're each going to follow their Rebbeim and their positions. Yeah, if you're Sephardi or Ashkenazi, I don't have to say which one is right and which one is wrong. As an Ashkenazi, the answer is obvious. Ashkenazi is correct. But I know Sephardim who will disagree with me, but they're wrong. So, but of course they should follow their tradition. Of course they should follow their Rebbeim. Of course they should listen to who's telling them what to do. So the fact that Rebbeim have disagreements, that's not anything new. That's been happening in Klal Yisrael for years and years and years. What we do is we have to choose a mahalach and stick with it. And you don't jump ship and say, I think the expression is changing horses in midstream. If I'm following this mahalach, then I'll follow this mahalach, loyally and totally. And if I'm going to follow the other one, I'll follow that other one. But I'm not going to jump back and forth and say, oh, for this one, I'll go like him. For this one, I'll go like him. Whatever's most convenient or easiest for me at the time. And that's it for this episode. If you want to find more about the show, you can go to my website, RabbiOrlofsky.com. You can sign up for one of my online shiurim. You can sponsor an episode. And again, thank you to all of our sponsors. The show is only possible because of you. If you want to ask a question, you want to make a comment, you want to sign up for one of our online shiurim, you want to listen to any of the other material or read any of the other material we have on our website, it's all available for you. And that's it until next time. I am David Orlofsky, and this has been the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.
It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. The Rabbi Orlofsky Show. knowledge and wisdom will help you grow. Lots of fun in every episode, and we don't have to rhyme. No, we don't. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show on RabbiOrlofsky.com. Torah, anytime, YouTube and more. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Till next time, till we meet again. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.